Hi guys, welcome to the full camera review of the Samsung Galaxy S21 Fan Edition. And the front camera video first of all is being shot in the 1080p at 30 frames per second video resolution. I am going to show you the front footage in all the available resolutions. The reason for that is with every resolution change, the mic's voice recording quality also changes, and you also see a change in the stability of the camera. So this is the 1080p at 30 frames per second video, and after this I'm going to switch to the 1080p at 60 frames per second video for this same front camera. This one is now the 60 frames per second video, and you can see that it's more smooth. The transitions and movements look more fluid in this resolution because of 60 frames per second mode, and the stability might not be as good as the 30 frames per second mode, but I think this phone is holding up pretty nice and tight here. Guys, please keep in mind that you guys are going to be the judge for all these front camera videos, and you have to drop your feedback in the comment section down below regarding the voice recording quality and other aspects. And make sure that you do not leave without hitting the subscribe button. There is a lot of noise around me, and you guys can get a very good idea about the voice recording quality of this mic. Let me switch to the 4K at 30 frames per second resolution now. Right now this one is 4K at 30 frames per second video, and I am just going to walk around to give you guys an idea about all the elements that I did in the previous two clips. And right now I am walking right in the face of the sun. This is a nice place to walk around, and I think this is pretty good to give you an idea about the stability of these cameras. This is going to be a very lengthy camera review, and I hope you guys appreciate and like it. Let's switch to the highest resolution and frame rate for the front camera now. This is 4K at 60 frames per second front camera video. Okay, now this camera has all the flagship features, and there is no doubt that this is a pretty good photography and videography machine. And as far as the front camera's features go, I can see the video pause button here, the screen capture button here, and while recording the video you can also switch between the front and the rear cameras, which is pretty good. And now we are going to switch to the other parts of this camera review of the Samsung Galaxy S21 Fan Edition. Make sure that you guys show your support along the way, and do hit the subscribe and like button as well. This is the portrait video on the Samsung S21 Fan Edition 5G, and I must say that Samsung has upped its game pretty well. The portrait mode looks very good. On this small screen I'm not finding any issues with the edge detection. The edges are pretty neat, at least here for now, but you guys are going to be the judge for all the front camera videos, and you can tell me how do you find the edge detection, the background blur, the depth effect, and other elements that are supposed to make a video good enough. The main camera on this phone is a 12 megapixels shooter. Other camera details are on your screen. Here is your look at the details of all the camera sensors. Let's take a look at the camera application now. The camera application welcomes you with the main photo mode as usual. Right here you have the ultra wide camera. S21 Fan Edition has a 3x optical zoom option, but you can also zoom all the way up to 30x, but remember that is going to be the digital zoom on this smartphone. Now on the top here you have the frame options. If you want to change the frame to 9:16 full like this, or you just want to use the default mode, you can do so from right here. And here you have the filters and the motion photo option. If you just swipe on the screen like this, you can switch between the front and the rear cameras. Here on the left side you have the portrait mode. The good thing about this portrait mode is that it works in 3x zoom as well, which means that you can take 3x zoomed in images, the portrait images, on your S21 Fan Edition. Remember that this option was not there on the S20 Fan Edition. You can also change the background blur intensity or apply different effects into your portrait images by clicking on this button right here. On the extreme left you have the single take feature, which basically creates a collection of small video clips and images and prepares them for social media sharing instantly. You can also choose what you want to include in the single shot collection by just simply clicking on these options appearing right here inside the single take options. Towards the right side we have the night mode. First of all, this phone's night mode works in the ultra wide camera as well, and it works for the front camera as well. The video options on this phone are pretty good. For both the front and the rear cameras, you get Ultra HD, which means 4K at 60 frames per second. You do get the other options like 1080p at 60 frames per second. These options are available for the front camera as well. You can switch between the front and the rear cameras while recording a video, and you can also switch between the ultra wide and the main camera while recording a video. The only option that I wish this phone had was the 60 fps video recording capability in the ultra wide camera. Unfortunately, it does not have that. Also, you have the super steady mode here, but remember that super steady brings the resolution down, so use it when you are not worried too much about the resolution of the phone. In the mode section, you have the AR doodle. First of all, the pro mode is there. The pro mode is quite nice and powerful. You do get all these options right here. You can switch between the ultra wide and wide cameras in the pro mode as well. Furthermore, this phone has a raw save option as well, so you can save your images directly in the raw format if you want. This phone also has the pro video mode, and the pro video mode also looks quite promising. These are your audio level bars appearing on the top left side of the phone, and once again you can choose the resolution by clicking on this icon right here. In the pro video mode, you get HD 30 frames per second, full HD in 24 and 30 frames per second. You do get the full HD 120 frames per second as well, which means if you record a pro video on your phone, you can actually create your own slow-mo out of the video recorded in the pro video mode of the S21 Fan Edition. This, in my opinion, is a really nice addition. As you can see right here, full HD 120 fps, and then obviously the ultra HD in 24, 30 and 60 frames per second. Furthermore, here in the more options of the phone, you do get the food mode to capture food photos, and yes, the portrait video, which also works for front and the rear cameras. I'll also attach the portrait video samples in today's camera review. Next up, we have the super slow-mo. The super slow-mo is also quite good because it has a motion detection button here. It automatically detects the motion and records the video when needed. Otherwise, recording a super slow-mo video on mid-range or premium mid-range devices is such a hassle because you need to perform the action and press this button right at the same time, which doesn't let you take a nice super slow-mo shot. Furthermore, you have the hyperlapse and dual recording mode, in which you can use the front and the rear cameras at the same time, like you can see right here on the screen. And inside the settings, we have some other options like the picture formats. You can also turn on or off the scene optimizer, the auto HDR, the electronic image stabilization in certain modes of the phone, and yeah, you do have the grid lines here. You can also turn on or off the tracking autofocus, and then there are the settings to keep option. Now, I have taken a lot of photos on the S21 Fan Edition, and these photos are going to give you a really nice idea about this phone's camera capabilities. So once again, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and let's dive right into the camera samples of the S21 Fan Edition, starting off with the rear camera videos. This is an ultra-wide video on your screen. The video is stable, but ultra-wide cameras are not supposed to give you a high amount of details, so there's that. Ultra-wide videos are only good to capture that wide field of view. Otherwise, the resolution will take years to come up to the mark, in my opinion. In the normal 1080p at 30 frames per second mode, the stability is still good and colors are slightly better than the ultra-wide mode. I was walking quite fast while recording all these videos, and these are all handheld videos. In the 60 frames per second mode, you get fluidity in the video. The transitions get smooth, but it takes a hit when it comes to the stability. In phones like the S21 Ultra, the 60 frames per second mode is as stable as 30 frames per second mode. S21 Fan Edition 60 frames per second stability is not as bad as the stability of the phones like A72 or A52, but I think there is still a little bit of room for improvement here. In the 4K at 30 frames per second ultra-wide video, you get slightly higher details, but the overall video still doesn't look that crisp, especially if you are viewing this video on a high-res monitor like me. Otherwise, the video seems pretty good. In my opinion, the 4K at 30 frames per second standard video mode is the best one on this phone. You get the best details and best colors in this one. The stability is also equally good. S21 FE captures very vibrant colors in the videos. The broad daylight does make these videos look good too. Lastly, we have the 4K at 60 frames per second video. This video significantly loses the stability, and for that compromise on the stability, you get ultra rich details and smooth footage. If you use a gimbal, the S21 Fan Edition is fully capable of working as your go-to photography and videography machine. If we have come this far in terms of stability and resolution, I am sure we will see even better results from the next year's Fan Edition. And yeah, this is your look at the rear camera's portrait mode video. I was about to forget it, it just crossed my mind at the right time. Let's move on to the photos now. The ultra-wide photo first of all is on the screen. While the ultra-wide camera looked a bit poor in the videos, it looks very good in the photos. Samsung has improved the ultra-wide camera. This one is much better than its predecessor. It's not having very high details, but details are good enough to post this photo across any social media platform. The colors are also pretty good. In ultra-wide photos, the saturation is generally higher on Samsung phones and the contrast looks good too. In the normal photo, you will find the phone capturing very nice colors once again. The sky looks good, shadows and highlights are appropriately managed. Image is well saturated as well. Reds and whites are captured nicely. Details are good too. I have no real complaints from this camera so far. The portrait mode does wipe off some extra edges, but still pretty neat and sweet. That depth effect is great. Background blur looks so good, and you can definitely change the background blur effects if you wish. I took multiple portrait images and I'm gonna show you all of those images. The best thing where Samsung actually sold this phone to me is the 3x mode in the portrait images. This option alone makes this S21 Fan Edition's camera a complete flagship grade camera, and this is how the 3x zoom looks. The 3x image is as good as the 1x image. To put things into a better perspective, let me show you all these images side by side now. One thing I would like to insist upon is the color consistency across all these modes. This is genuinely Samsung's credit that they don't let their camera sensors and image algorithms output different colors for all of the modes or for each sensor. Otherwise, I have always seen the ultra-wide, main and portrait modes of cameras outputting their own colors on phones of Xiaomi, Redmi and other brands. Let me know which image is your favorite from all these images and how would you like to analyze these. This is now another set of similar images in the different modes, and these images are for you guys to judge. There are so many photos coming your way in order to give you an in-depth idea about the S21 Fan Edition's camera. Let me now show you a few ultra-wide and normal images. The normal mode has a more bluish sky. The sky has a very slight purple tone in the ultra-wide image, but both images are equally good. You can also view the 3x image next to the normal image now. The normal image is more vibrant for sure. It's just great to have such a nice telephoto camera on the S21 Fan Edition. This is actually the first telephoto camera that I'll be using after my S21 Ultra. Otherwise, I never really understood the purpose of telephoto cameras. I actually hated these cameras, but this phone has changed my perspective. This one is an indoor ultra-wide and normal image, and once again the result is good. Another thing I have noticed here is that the S21 Fan Edition doesn't take too warm or too cool images. Its color tone is very well balanced. You will now see a number of normal images shot in the broad daylight and also indoor. The only thing where I would want to see this camera improving is the edge detection in both the normal and the portrait mode. If your subject is stable, the images will come out great with neat edges. Because I am only looking at the images shot by the S21 Fan Edition, I am unable to find out any flaws. I am not a photography expert. I am an average user who would just like his phone to take social media ready images on the go, and the S21 Fan Edition, in my opinion, fulfills my requirement. If this is your requirement, I think you guys will agree with me, but I would love to hear you out as well in the comment section below.
There's something in the air.
The night mode images are on your screen now. The low light performance of this phone needs improvements. Low light images come out with a lot of noise. The moment you switch to the night mode, the noise vanishes and the images become crisp clear. But I would want it to reduce the noise in the normal low light mode too. The night mode works for the ultra wide camera as well. This night mode is not as refined as that of a flagship phone like the S21 Ultra or the iPhone 13 Pro. In my opinion, it's just acceptable, and yes, it's definitely much better than the mid-range devices. Let me show you some selfies now. I have kind of become a fan of the selfies taken on the S21 Fan Edition. I took all the selfies in the standard resolution mode and I used the original or the natural color tone. You do have the 32 megapixels mode for selfies if you want extremely high details. The selfies at times look oversharp, but I captured most of these selfies outside in the broad daylight, so that might be the factor here. The normal selfies have high saturation and slightly pinkish color tone. Portrait selfies, in my opinion, have more close to real life colors. The selfies in both the wide and the close-up modes look neat. Background blur is too intense and looks great. The phone does wipe some edges nicely. It can wipe off some extra edges at times, but most of the times it works quite well. You will also see the indoor selfies. Since I am only reviewing this phone's camera, like I said before, my perspective is very limited here. It's limited to what I am seeing on the screen and I quite like it, but I'll have more clarity once I do comparisons with the S20 Fan Edition, S21 Plus, iPhone 13 and the Google Pixel 6. And by the way, these comparisons are on the way. I am currently working on these comparisons. In the meanwhile, I would definitely want you guys to drop your own thoughts in the comments too. And that's pretty much it with our S21 Fan Edition's camera review. This phone's price is an ongoing debate. Nobody likes its price tag, but it definitely has a great camera for that money. Yes, Samsung can still improve the stabilization in the 60 frames per second mode. Samsung also needs to improve the low light and night mode performance of this phone, but otherwise, this camera is decent and it gets my recommendation. Subscribe if you haven't yet and like this video too. With that being said, I will sign off and see you all in the next one.